By late January 1945, the Western Front had become something difficult to describe. The cold that winter was not ordinary weather. It felt like part of the war itself, mixed in with the mud, the smell of burned wood and diesel, and the strange silence that fell over a place. After the artillery had stopped, snow came and went across western Germany, but the frost never left. It sank into the ground and stayed there, patient, as if it had nowhere better to be. American supply lines were stretched thin. The roads had never been built for this kind of weight. Units moved constantly, forward, sideways, and sometimes back, passing through villages that had already been destroyed and were being destroyed all over again. Then came a crisis no one had planned for. Prisoners, thousands of them, then tens of thousands, then more. Among them were women. They had served Germany in roles the government called non-combat, but by the end of the war, that distinction meant nothing. Some had operated searchlights during Allied bombing raids. Others had kept communications running for units that no longer existed. There were radio operators, typists, nurses, and factory workers forced into service as Germany ran out of men. When their units collapsed, when the officers surrendered or vanished or were killed, these women found themselves at the edge of American lines, with no clear status and no plan. They were taken into custody because there was nothing else to do with them. Processing teams worked under pressure that did not allow for careful thought. One such group, according to accounts collected in post-war testimony and U.S. Army military government records, arrived at a temporary holding compound in early 1945, somewhere in the region between the Rhine and the Saar. The camp had been assembled from whatever was available, which was not much. A cluster of repurposed farm outbuildings, a long wooden structure that had once stored equipment, several canvas shelters stretched over frames hammered into the frozen ground. The women were from male prisoners and placed inside the wooden building. It was better than the tents, not by much, but measurably clear's throat better. There were walls. There was a roof. There were benches running along both sides of the interior, rough-cut planks laid across simple frames, nothing more. The women had been moving for days. Some had surrendered after short marches, others after longer ordeals that had included bombardment, exposure, and the particular exhaustion that comes from watching everything you understood about the world stop functioning. They were hungry, many of them, and cold in the way that does not leave the body quickly, even after reaching shelter. When they were finally told to sit, the relief was immediate and then almost instantly inadequate. The benches were bare wood, unfinished, splintered along the edges, set at a height that forced weight onto the tailbone and hips in a way that sharpened rather than eased the pain of long movement. Within minutes, women were shifting, rising slightly, adjusting, unable to find a position that did not ache. It began as quiet complaint passed between women in Low German that the guards could not follow. Then someone said it plainly, not loudly, not defiantly, just honestly, the way a person states a fact when it can no longer be ignored. Sitting hurts. Several women nodded. Others repeated it in different words. The benches were the problem. After everything they had endured, after the retreat and the surrender, and the long uncertainty about what would happen to them, What they could not manage was the bench. A guard noticed. He was young, one of several posted inside and outside the building. An infantryman pulled from the line for rear area duties he had not expected. His German was limited to commands, but he had eyes, and he understood bodies. He saw the way the women sat and rose and sat again. He saw the grimacing. He walked to the nearest bench and pressed his own hand against the wood, testing it as though confirming something he already suspected. He said nothing. He left. The women did not expect him to return. They had been prepared by years of propaganda that neither side fully recognized as propaganda while it was happening, to understand the enemy as a category rather than a person. American soldiers, they had been told in various official and unofficial ways, were undisciplined, vindictive, prone to the kind of violence that defeated armies suffered as a matter of course. Complaints from prisoners were not merely pointless under this understanding. They were dangerous. In the system they had served, discomfort was not a problem to be solved. It was a condition to be borne, evidence of weakness if acknowledged aloud. The guard came back. He brought 2 others with him. Between them, they carried U.S. Army wool, blankets, folded, and a bundle of straw gathered from somewhere nearby. They worked without announcing what they were doing, without looking at the women directly, folding blankets over the plank surfaces, pushing straw underneath where the frames allowed. One guard ran his hand along a particularly rough edge of wood and spent several minutes smoothing it with a small tool he had pulled from a jacket pocket. When they finished, one of them gestured simply, "Sit." The women hesitated, then one sat down. Her posture changed. Not dramatically, not with any visible relief that could be called relief, but measurably. The hardness remained. The cold still rose from the floor. But the concentrated pressure had distributed differently, and the difference was unmistakable to a body that had been looking for any reason to stop fighting its own discomfort. Others followed slowly. No one spoke for a while. In the days that followed, multiple memoirs and post-war interviews describe a pattern that extended well beyond a single afternoon. Guards at this and similar compounds rotated between women who spoke even fragmentarily German and those who did not, apparently by informal arrangement rather than any directive. When temperatures dropped further, additional blankets appeared. Olive drab wool, heavy and scratchy, but clean, distributed without paperwork or ceremony. Oversized field jackets were issued when the supply chain allowed, and when it did not, personal items sometimes appeared instead. A sergeant who noticed a woman with no gloves left a pair near where she worked without making the gesture visible. He did not wait to be thanked. Medical inspections followed U.S. Army procedure rather than German ideology. A distinction that mattered more than it might seem. Frostbite was treated methodically. Illness was reported and addressed. Menstrual needs, almost entirely absent from official documentation but present in post-war accounts, were handled with what one former prisoner described decades later as awkward practicality, embarrassing for everyone involved, but addressed rather than ignored. Red Cross supplies helped when they arrived. Improvised solutions filled the gaps. The point was that the gaps were filled. What accumulated across these days and weeks was not trust. Trust did not arrive that quickly for people who had been taught to expect something entirely different. What accumulated was evidence. The guards shouted when necessary and not otherwise. Rules were enforced consistently, which meant they could be understood, which meant they could be followed without constant fear of arbitrary punishment. When an infraction occurred, the consequence was predictable and proportionate. There were no collective punishments for individual behavior. No one was made an example. Authority operated here through procedure rather than terror. And this was so different from what many of the women had experienced inside the German military structure that it took time simply to recognize it as a pattern rather than a coincidence. The Geneva Convention was not for the U.S. Army of late 1944 and early 1945 a theoretical document. It was training, it was doctrine, it was the standard against which officers were evaluated. Abuse was investigated when reported, imperfectly, inconsistently, but genuinely enough to create a culture in which cruelty was an exception rather than an expectation. This did not produce a perfect system. Food was basic and sometimes insufficient. News from home was non-existent. Many prisoners did not know whether their families had survived the bombing of German cities that continued even as the ground war collapsed. The war was still present in the distance, audible most nights, and the uncertainty of what came next never entirely lifted. But the bench did not hurt as much, and in a situation defined by loss of control over nearly everything, that was not nothing. When the camps dissolved and the women moved on to larger facilities or were eventually released into a Germany that no longer existed in the form they had known, they carried particular memories alongside the larger ones. Not the surrender, not the fear of the first hours. What stayed with them, surfacing in letters written decades later and interviews given to researchers who were patient enough to listen, were the small moments. The blanket that arrived without explanation, the guard who smoothed a rough edge of wood because it needed smoothing, the bench that stopped being a problem because someone noticed it was one. Nearly all of them said some version of the same thing, worded differently, but meaning the same. We thought it would be worse. We'd been told what to expect, and what happened was not that. The enemy had become specific, individual, capable of noticing a detail and doing something about it. Authority had turned out to be something other than fear with a uniform on. That is not a small thing. It does not belong in the footnotes of a war that killed millions. It belongs in the record of how people behave when the structures they have been handed finally give out, and what they choose to do in the space that remains. If stories like this matter to you, consider liking the video so they reach more people. Your support helps ensure these moments, often missing from the larger narrative, aren't lost to time.